You're listening to School Solutions Talk, an exploration into the development of school culture and community through the integration of solution-focused practice. Here are your hosts, Tara Gretton and Vicky Essebag. Thanks to our sponsor, Work Collaborative, a not-for-profit movement that helps schools lead change from within. They trust that teachers, leaders, parents, and students have the capability to solve their own challenges when given the right support. Join this global movement of educators at workcollaborative.com.
Hi, everyone. We welcome our listeners here today. Hi, Tara.
Hi, Vicky. Great to see you.
Great to see you too. And you know what? We are just so excited and inspired to be starting this new podcast for you. This podcast is called School Solutions Talk. And, you know, it really was the idea of the podcast was born out of many of the sessions that we had in our other podcast, A Call Across the Pond. For any of you that have listened to it, we also have a podcast called A Call Across the Pond, Transforming Relationships at School, at Home, and Beyond. And many of those episodes were centered on schools because Tara and I do a lot of solution-focused work in schools. And so upon reflection, we had the conversation where we said, you know what, this is a great opportunity to reflect on our experience and our expertise in schools and to bring that to the forefront. And so that's effectively what we're doing in this podcast. And so we're really, really happy to have you here. Yes. Tara?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so exciting. And yeah, I think in our, not that we were trying not to talk about schools, but it was very hard not to talk about schools.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And yeah, as so much of our, as you said, our work and our passion and so much starts at school,
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I think that our experience is that we want to talk about what's going on in schools, and we also want to talk about what will really work in schools when things are done a little bit differently in terms of the way that people relate with each other, the way in which people support each other, the way in which people carry out their day-to-day business. That we really believe that solution focus just sheds an entirely new light on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and we've kind of thought about a couple of questions today to sort of pose to each other, and to think about, initially what we're hoping, and we've touched on it already, but what we're kind of hoping for, and from, the opportunity to share this podcast, and just I think what's really exciting is with some of the ideas that we're sort of generating already and thinking about who we would like to be able to have conversations with. Both of us we're kind of thinking about whole school communities, and that this podcast is a place for everybody's voice to be heard.
Yes.
And that is really important to us, not only those voices of people that are using solution focused in the school context already, but actually to hear from people within the school communities, people that might be more curious about, who are curious about how solution focused might be applied, who might want to kind of put us to the test and ask us some really important questions in relation to some of the challenges that they might be experiencing in schools. How might solution focus how might it be utilised in order to support particular issues in school? And also a space for the voices of, every aspect of schools, whole staff communities, whether it's the student who, hopefully there'll be a willing student out there who might want to come and ask us some questions, who might want to share their experience of solution focused, We'd love to hear from parents, from carers, from everybody. And so we are just so excited to be able to open up those possibilities of having those conversations with people.
Absolutely. And, we have heard from a lot of teachers and administrators who are already incorporating solution focus in schools, and we would love to be interviewing them to learn about what it is that they're doing and what they're interested in and what's been working for them within their schools. And we also want to interview solution focused leaders, leaders who have experience or expertise in schools, who have, who have seen the difference that solution focus can make in schools. So we want to hear your stories. We want to hear what has worked and what your thoughts are about it and how you continue to move forward using solution focus in schools. And for some people and for some solution focused leaders, that's about the one-on-one conversations that they're having with students and families in a counseling capacity or a social work or therapeutic capacity. For other solution focused leaders, it's how they're aligning solution focused brief therapy with communication and how they're actually encouraging people to use it in the classroom, in the school, at meetings, things like that. So we want to hear from everybody. We want to hear everything that's going on, because one thing that Tara and I know for sure is that this works, and it really works in school communities. So we're very excited about that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think building on the things that you've shared, I think, that we have such a mutual passion for sort of almost bringing solution focused out of that therapy room or out of that counselling room. Obviously what happens there is really important and useful as well. But yeah, bringing it out into the community and, as you described, into the classroom, into meetings, and into the very fabric of schools. From
Yes.
experience, the difference that makes, and that it can be in the hallways, in the corridors, and that when we're intentional of, and how we use solution focused, how we're kind of really got the assumptions, what underpins it, what we believe in as solution focused practitioners, soaring through our veins, the difference that makes to how we interact with people, even in a micro moment, even in a fleeting moment. And I think what we're seeing the impact of that. We're hearing the impact of that from students, from school staff, from parents. And that is what I think, we're so excited to share. And as our sort of understanding and our training and all of those aspects of how we're using and utilizing solution focused, it's telling us, this makes a difference. It works.
Yes.
It really, really
Yes.
works. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to be in this space with you, as always, Vicky, but to be able to share more of that. But as you say, to hear from others, how their experience,
Yes.
how they're
Yes.
doing it in their unique kind of setting, in their unique kind of
Exactly.
environment with them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm also really inspired to be in this with you, Tara, and to continue to have our wonderful conversations. And, one of the things about solution focus that I find so meaningful is really how we change our mindsets to prepare ourselves for how we communicate with other people. And so much of it, solution focused practitioners talk about how that so much about communicating in a solution focused manner is how we prepare ourselves for that communication. As a practitioner in a therapeutic environment, we prepare the space. We prepare the space. We want it to be inviting. We want it to be very centered on the client. And we want to come in really separating ourselves from the client's experience to allow the client to essentially lead the way, to lead the way. And in a classroom setting, for example, it's not all that dissimilar, right? So with a solution focused mindset, we want practitioners in the classroom, teachers, educators, educational assistants, to walk in as well into the classroom and to reframe their mindset so that if there is, let's imagine, a student who is unhappy with the class that day or unhappy with the lesson and they're complaining and they're acting out and all of this, to not to look at that as a problem, but to see it as an opportunity. An opportunity as to how are we going to engage that student. And maybe it's a great opportunity to say, hey, you know what? Thank you so much for sharing that, because what that's telling me as your teacher is that maybe I need to be rethinking about how we're carrying out this lesson. And maybe we all need to be thinking about it. And you know what? Let's brainstorm some ideas. What is it that we really want to see happening in this lesson? What is it that we really want to see happening in this classroom? And let's write those things down. And, the whole idea of also helping the teacher to do that for themselves. Maybe the teacher can say, hey, let me sit down with myself and ask myself what I want to see happen differently in these lessons. And then maybe to take those two lists and to bring them to class and to show the students and to look at the similarities in what the teacher wants and what the student wants. And then where do we go from here? Or what is happening already that we see in these lists, even if in just such a small way. So that would be an example of how if we can shift our mindset to look at problems as opportunities, we can make great, great leaps of change in classrooms.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love everything that you said. And I think as well, and I think we both kind of experienced this in how we've evolved, how we share solution focused with school communities, is that, it when you learn something, it can be like, where do I start with this? How do I do this? I don't have time.
Yes.
It can feel
Yes. Yeah.
too much. And I think having, worked within education and worked alongside school communities, it's like, how can we, or, hearing from them, what's going to make this most accessible for them. And I think what's really wonderful is that you can take like the smallest thing from solution focused. It can be just really having those clear solution focused assumptions, those beliefs at the forefront of your mind, and that makes a difference to how you interact, that you can be really
Exactly.
intentional with those. And if you're really thinking about, right, this is about what's wanted and what's working, that
Yes.
can be enough to have an impact on how you intentionally turn up into an interaction with somebody. That sort of noticing what's working,
Yes.
being curious about what's wanted, and that, as you described, that we can work with alongside students, that we can co-create together.
Exactly. Yes. And that we can change the narrative.
Yeah.
Right? That we have these narratives that make us see particular situations in a certain light, or that make us reflect on certain students or certain programs or whatever in schools in a certain light, but that we can actually change those narratives to create new stories that provide new opportunity.
Yeah.
So yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was delivering training today with a residential school that's in Scotland, and they, a lot of the students there have experienced trauma, quite significant trauma, and it's quite a remarkable provision, and because it's that mix of education and residential as well, and so there was a cross section of their staff on the training. But they were talking about sort of how they might, make use of solution focused in things like handovers. As new staff comes in, what's being shared? They're obviously needing to share any concerns or any that in terms of safeguarding, but also that in those handovers that they're sharing what's gone well.
Yes.
What's
Yes.
what are those sort of, even those they were talking about, even those tiny sort of sparkling moments. And that,
Yes.
so even, in those handovers, in the very fabric of the running of a school, that the solution focused language can be utilized. And actually, what they were
Absolutely.
talking about, by being in those, in the fabric of things and what they do in terms of procedures, that then the language just becomes more and more and more and more familiar, and so
Yes.
that it's contagious, and then people just sort of start mirroring and start doing more of it, start doing more of what works, and that's what people have told us, isn't it? And that's what we've
Yes.
experienced. That people, they want more of it because it works and it makes a difference. If we're
And
kind
they feel better. They
Yeah,
feel better. Their sense of well-being, to want to be there, to really want to celebrate themselves, their students, their school communities. That just immediately shifts. It's almost like developing new neural pathways, isn't it? That, these are new ways of thinking, and we can become used to these ways of thinking, especially when they bring us joy.
yeah,
And we realize very quickly that we become inspired because we realize that we have a lot that we bring to the educational experience, and so does everybody else,
yeah.
and that we all come together and contribute to this learning environment in our own way.
Thanks to Family Based Solutions, a charitable organization that aims to end the cycle of abuse in families and to repair relationships using the solution focused brief therapy method. They offer counseling services, support groups, solution focused training, online support, and global leadership to those who need it most. Learn more at familybasedsolutions.org. Thanks to our sponsor, the Canadian Centre for Brief Coaching and Family-Based Solutions. The CCBC provides workplace training programs, coaching, and consulting to organizations across various sectors worldwide, all with solution-focused coaching as the fundamental educational framework. For more, visit pracademia.com. That's pracademia.com.
And I kind of think, if you think about, the language that we use constructs meaning,
Yes, exactly.
and that, and I think that kind of really simplifies in my mind what solution focused is. If we're focusing on, if the language that we're using is predominantly problem focused, and we imagine that, kind of being the constant, or what's, across whole school communities, then the impact of that is going to be pretty negative.
Yes, yes,
And it's not to say that there isn't space to talk about problems within solution focus. There most definitely is, but it's kind of where you move on from that. Okay, so we know what the issues are. There's space, people have had those issues validated, and then we're like, so what do we want instead?
exactly.
And we're talking about, when we're using language to talk about what's wanted, and we're getting a description of that, then already that's going to make a difference. There's hope, there's possibility,
Exactly.
there's shared vision. And actually, what schools have sort of told us and what we've experienced is that it actually makes some difficult conversations easier to have. You're thinking about work with having conversations with parents, and they might have some questions, some difficulties that they need to be addressed. And, you're starting a meeting by asking a parent, what are you hoping for from this meeting? If
Yes.
things were to change, what would be better? And school staff, they say, oh, parents like, wow, you want to know what I want. And we experience that with students as well. And then, so you've got that, and then you've got, okay, how are we managing, or how have, even though things have been so difficult, what have we done that's got us through?
Yes.
How are they? What are the times? When are the times, or what's happening when things are maybe just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit better?
Yes.
So that difference when we're using that language of what's wanted, what's working, and that's spread across the school community, the difference that's going to make to people's experience of that environment is going to be significantly better.
Well, it's like what you were saying. It's very hopeful. It's a hopeful way of thinking. And as soon as we start thinking and talking in those hopeful ways and using that hopeful type of language, it immediately shifts the way we respond to our immediate environment,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
it does.
Immediately.
Yeah.
And that's why people are so different when they come out of a solution focused conversation rather than from a problem focused conversation. When
Yes.
they come out of a problem focused conversation, they're exhausted,
Yeah.
they're troubled,
Yeah.
right? The intensity of that conversation is just overwhelming. And we see that a lot in, for example, meetings with parents and
Yes.
their children. We see that. We see that in meetings and conversations with staff who are really struggling. You know, they just come out of those conversations exhausted, and it only further exacerbates the problem. But in a conversation where we can speak in a hopeful way and just use very simple language like, what would you like to be better?
Yeah.
You know, or to use, you know, a miracle type of question, you know, if things were better, suppose things were to entirely change tomorrow for the better, what might that look like for you? It inspires a completely different type of conversation, but it also inspires a different way of thinking and feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And people usually walk away from those conversations actually making immediate change without even realizing what they're doing, just because they're in a different mind frame now that is giving them the fuel, the energy to make productive change.
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of makes me think about, if that's not only in those kind of settings, but it's also happening in the everyday interactions, then, or a student that's kind of just met with a teacher or a head of year or whatever because something needed to be addressed, but it was done in a solution focused way. Then that young person goes back, to the classroom, and just thinking about how that child or young person then arrives into the classroom. And, from the break time, that transition from one classroom to the other, if people are talking about, I mean, I'm always banging on about this, Vicky, but, noticing them and connecting with them. And before they correct them, it's like, oh, it's great to see you. And,
Yeah,
now
yeah,
take your shirt in and have a great day. Then that student's going to turn up into the classroom with that teacher and with that class of students, hopefully in a much better place. So that's going to make for a better outcome in the classroom. So the impact on everything, is
yes. It really is what we call in Canada a snowball effect.
yeah,
Especially now as we're
especially
seeing all the
now.
snow outside.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it really is a snowball
it is a
effect. It
snowball.
really builds on
Yeah,
itself. Yeah,
it is.
yeah,
Yeah, totally. And I was also thinking about in um, with teachers when they're kind of having their departments, kind of, I think they call it a deep dive. Maybe there's a better term for that as well. But if they've got a senior leader coming in to observe their classroom, or they're looking at all of their kind of materials and looking at their kind of mark schemes and all of that, that if whoever's doing that in that senior leader, that administrator position, is going in with a very solution focused mindset, rather than, which often teachers experience, where it's actually, let's look for the issues, because we'll just focus on them, and then we'll kind of do, because we kind of know what you do well. Because I have heard a teacher say that they didn't get the positives or what was working because
yeah.
the senior leader just assumed that they knew that.
Right, right.
But actually, if you want staff morale, thinking about building up and building your staff's sense of self-belief going into those deep dives with a solution focused approach, it's going to make such a difference to that staff.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that it's almost like an intention to an overall sense of well-being in schools. And definitely it comes from, it has to start from that administrative place where the administration says, this is our intention. We really want to bring well-being to our school or our school community, and we're going to prioritize that. And so that is prioritized in everything that goes on in the school, in the way that, they model well-being, in the way that they run their meetings, in the way that they encourage their teachers to think and communicate. And so this whole idea of solution focus as a practice, as a therapeutic practice or a counseling practice on the one hand, but also as a communicative practice. Right? That administrators, for example, at meetings are saying, we are not going to minimize the importance of prioritizing communication and well-being and the building of relationships and well-being. We're not going to minimize that. We're going to make it an important part of our agenda. We're going to put it front and center in everything we do. And of course, Tara, you and I are going to talk about how to do that.
Yeah.
So that is really something that I'm looking so forward to in these episodes, and so I think that we're off to a good start, Tara. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. We most definitely are. And I think I love what you said about that emphasis on well-being.
Yeah.
This is about well-being for everybody. This is about everybody's well-being. And this is
it's not to say that we don't want to focus on academic issues in schools and the importance of prioritizing the academics. Of course, we want to do that, but academics and well-being have to go hand in hand. It can't be that we're just throwing in well-being as the special well-being day, or that special well-being activity that we're doing for our school community. Academics and well-being need to go hand in hand in everything that we do, because that is how we truly see success in schools. That is how we see success in our students. That's how we see success in our staff, and in our families. Yeah. So,
we know that when you use solution focused and when you work with people in a solution focused way, then generally it has a really positive impact on outcome.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. So, all right. Well, Tara, thank you.
More conversations, and looking forward to having the opportunity again to meet some many wonderful people along this journey with you, Vicky. So,
well, and you know what? Honestly, if you're listening to this podcast today and you think you'd like to come on to the podcast to talk with Tara and I about your experience or about any questions that you might have, we'd love to have you. So please reach out to us. You've got our information in the bio of this podcast, and so you can reach out to us, and we'll be happy to have a conversation with you. And we look forward to seeing you next time, or speaking to you next time. Okay.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thanks, everybody.
Our sponsor, the Instructional Coaching Group, is the global destination for coaching and education, grounded in more than 25 years of research focused on improving teaching, strengthening leadership, and increasing student success. The Instructional Coaching Group partners with schools and systems worldwide to build sustainable coaching practices that support educators and improve outcomes for students. Learn more at instructionalcoaching.com. School Solutions Talk is produced by Tara Gretton and Vicky Essebag. If you like what you hear, please rate, review, and subscribe so that our podcast can reach even more listeners like you. Thanks for downloading.